if a Fed official committed mortgage fraud, that this should be examined, and that they shouldn't be serving as one of the nation's leading financial regulators. And what we haven't heard from Ms. Cook is we haven't heard her say, "I didn't do it." We haven't heard her say, "I didn't do it." She just keeps saying the president can't remove her.
Tick-tock, tick-tock. We wait for Lisa Cook's denial of the allegations. She is formally filing now a lawsuit against the Trump administration. It happened this morning, saying this, quote, "The president's actions violate Fifth Amendment due process rights when he, quote, concocted the basis for her firing. But the White House says Lisa Cook's actions tell you all you need to know."
If it were me and I had made the mistakes on the mortgage forms that are accused, and I would either deny it because it was not true, or I would go on leave until people resolve the matter. And the fact that she's not doing that now suggests that she's being partisan.
Anthony, we'll talk to you like your family, which you are, Pompliano. How do you see this? Because just Wade saying that you should have stepped aside, as Clarida did, as I think Kaplan did as well, different questions about financial behavior. However, then trying to fire her has made, now she's the victim. And the issue is the president's ability to fire someone on the Fed board for cause rather than alleged mortgage fraud.
Well, I think there's two things here. So put Lisa Cook aside for a second. If we have an organization and you can't fire people, you already know you don't have the best people. You're not getting better. You're not improving. You're not able to compete in the market. And so we've seen this across government over and over again. I think this administration stepped into office and said, hey, listen, if you don't do a good job, we're going to fire you. And so I think that anytime I see an organization where people can't be fired, immediately you've got an issue. So if you put that back into now Lisa Cook, is just pretend we're in corporate America. If somebody was accused of a very serious crime, there would be repercussions. Now, depending on what the business is, it could be everything from being fired to being put on leave, kind of everything in between. It could be internal investigation, et cetera. I don't think we've heard any of that come from the Federal Reserve itself. They've pretty much just ignored the entire situation. And so naturally, what you have is you have the boss of the country, the president of the United States, has stepped in and said, hey, listen, we've got to take action here. Now, you can disagree with firing versus leave versus, investigation, whatever. But at the end of the day, we can't just have an organization that is going to completely ignore any degree of what's happened here. And I think that what you're watching is you're watching a business person in the White House who takes a very different approach to governing this stuff. Now, I actually think it's a good thing that it's going to go to court, because the court is going to set a precedent here. And if all of a sudden the president can fire the Fed governor over something like this, I think there's a lot more people who are going to start getting fired in some of these organizations, because the president's going to realize, he had a reality TV show where he said, you're fired. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to go through and find who are the low performers. He's start firing them. So we're going to see what happens.
I'm nervous about that part, Pomp, and I'll tell you why. I don't really care about Lisa Cook. If she actually committed mortgage fraud, she's going to get whacked, and she deserves her day in court. She's going to get it. What I'm worried about is changing the metric of the independence of the Fed that's worked for over 100 years for investors all around the world. So I don't want any president, and this one included, this is not a Trump issue. The executive should not have the ability to go into an independent board like this that has a role outside of the president's agenda and start whacking the ones he doesn't like. And that doesn't work, because the reason the Fed has been so successful globally, and I keep saying the way you measure success is how many cents of every dollar come to the United States economy versus every other economy on earth. We are more than 50%. Why? The Fed. People trust the Fed. So you can bash the Fed, as every president has, and that is a sport that I love to watch. And the Fed always says, we don't give a poo-poo. We just don't give a poo-poo. And they smile at each other, they yell at each other. Remember that ridiculous hard hat thing the other day, the Fed renovation? Powell doesn't give a poo-poo. It doesn't matter. He's the chair of the Fed, and thank goodness he is. And the whole world knows that by the time this is over, it will still be an independent Fed. It doesn't matter about Lisa Cook. It doesn't matter. She's getting roasted like a chicken on a spit right now. And good for her if she can stand it. But if she did mortgage fraud, even if it was a mistake, and she signed those docs, she's screwed. Period.
I wanted President Trump to lean over during that Fed building visit and knock on Powell's hard hat and go, "Hello,
Do like the Biff thing?
McFly."
Anybody home? Anybody home? Do you
Hello,
know what happened if I
McFly.
turned in my homework in your handwriting? I'd get fired. Okay. Why is Lisa Cook a threat to Fed independence?
The Fed's not independent.
If she gets whacked now before due process.
Even if you agree that the Fed's been as good as you've said, I have questions about that. But she's trying to say that the president has concocted this thing. That's the word that the lawsuit uses. How is the president pointing out that there's good evidence that you've committed mortgage fraud as the person who helps regulate things like banks giving mortgages and the interest rate? How is that concocted? I don't see it as a threat to independence. I see it as an affirmation of a Fed that can be independent because it's accountable when they screw up. To me, real independence is when there's real accountability. And that's what the Fed is lacking right here. So I don't see the threat. I don't see the threat to independence. I maybe agree with you, but I don't see it here.
Well, regarding the Fed itself, if you can find something else better in the structure around the world, I'd be happy to use that. But the reason we don't have hyperinflation like Venezuela is we have a Fed. If you allow the El Presidente to set interest rates, you end up with bread costing $1,000 more every day. And that's what happens in Venezuela. So, the idea that you have the executive deciding monetary policy, that just doesn't work.
By the way, definitely not arguing for that.
Okay.
I have no interest
so we agree
in
on
arguing
that.
for the president.
Regarding her, if tomorrow we could have her trial, would you be good with that? Get this thing over with?
Well, yeah, and we talked about this. I think she is entitled to due process, and it should go fast. But they're trying to say that accountability is antithetical to independence. That's actually what the argument they're making if you look under the hood.
She's saying whatever she
and
can.
I'm just saying that's totally wrong.
Right. No, I agree. And President Trump has, him and his team believe that they had the authority to fire her under the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. So clearly he did his homework and he knew what he was doing. He also believes in having accountability and making sure that the American people have full confidence in the leaders that are under him. So I think that's a whole nother part of it.
Would you want a trial? Would you want your day in court, or just you think she'd get whacked?
She should resign. Which she has, I believe.
What if she's not?
No, she's staying and fighting now.
No.
She's staying and fighting.
She refuses
She
to vote.
refuses.
Okay, but don't you think everybody, not just in the Fed, what works in America is your day in court?
Right, and it will play out, obviously.
Well, why don't we accelerate it so she has her day faster? Then everybody would be happy here. This panel would be happy if she was on trial tomorrow morning. Period.
Yeah, that's true, but you have to remember that there's two different arguments here. Like, should she get a day in court? Absolutely.
Yes.
They should do it quickly, right? It shouldn't be dragged out over a year or two. I think everyone agrees on that. But going back to your idea of the Fed being independent, I don't think the Fed's independent at all. I actually think that the sport you described of the presidents attacking, I think that they listen more to some presidents than they do others. And it happens from both sides of the aisle, right? If you go back, Trump in his first term just would sit in the Oval Office and just tweet all day long at the Fed and tell them, hey, cut interest rates or do whatever. Elizabeth Warren sent a letter. We had Joe Biden call Powell into his office and, like the teacher going to see the principal. So it happens on both sides of the aisle. But I just think that when you look at the Fed's actions, for example, why have they not been cutting interest rates if inflation was higher last year before the election than now?
Yep,
so again, they'll say, oh, it's inflation, it's all this stuff, right? And I think that you can kind of explain away at times. But if you consistently look at the Federal Reserve, I think that there are times where they lean definitely in support of one administration versus another. And the second that you start to lean in support of one administration over another, you're not independent. And so I think that let's just stop the charade. Let's just say, hey, look, the Fed is the Fed. They're not independent. That's okay. But just go and do the monetary policy. And what I actually think is the bigger problem at the Fed is they say they're going to do one thing and then they pull the rug out from underneath investors. 2021, they said they're going to keep interest rates suppressed near zero for a long period of time. 2022, they hike interest rates at the fastest rate in history. That's the type of stuff that I think people lose.
A little pandemic action in there, Pomp.
No, well, the pandemic had happened 2 years before, but I think it's just like people lose confidence in the Fed when they say they're going to do one thing and they end up doing something else.
We had 19%. Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out, I'm glad that somebody seems to care about uncovering all of the garbage fraud in the mortgage industry. And it is Bill Pulte at the Federal Housing Finance Agency. I want all of the dirt to come out because I know that what caused the housing bubble were no income, no doc, fraudulent mortgages. And it was occupancy fraud, it was income and asset fraud. And what happened after all of those, the bubble burst and everybody was underwater, the government then moved in and refinanced everybody's liar garbage loans under HAMP, HARP, Hullabaloo, whatever the hell that program was called. Everybody got refinanced. Nobody got charged with boo. Nobody went to prison. And I mean the borrowers. I mean the home buyers. Finally, we're starting to see some of this.
He has tools that are available. I mean, you're talking about the AI stuff that they're able to use now.
I think what Pulte's going to do is he's going to lean on AI to go through all of the files. If you have issued a fraudulent mortgage to a bank, you should be sweating bullets right now, because it won't be a person looking at your file. They're going to scrape the data, process it. It's going to red flag anything that has this problem about primary residence, and you are going to answer to the law. So if you're thinking about getting a mortgage, you better make damn sure you look at every box you've checked before you sign it, because some machine is going to scrape your data pretty soon. And I think Pulte happens to be the guy that came in when AI took over.
Right.
So he's taking a lot of heat.
More. I want more. Just a note, according to court records, the Washington, D.C. District Court Judge Gia M. Cobb will be presiding over the lawsuit that was filed today by Lisa Cook against the Trump administration. Hearing tomorrow, Friday, 10 a.m., Washington, D.C.
There you go, happening. Boom.
And
But
Jerome
that's the
Powell's listed as a defendant in that, by the way, along with the president.
That's not about the mortgage. Again, this is not about alleged mortgage fraud. This is about her being removed as a governor from the Fed